What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana, of course, coming off one of the most surprising seasons in all of college football last year in 2024. They went 11-2 last year, made the college football playoff, and yeah, this is an Indiana team that I picked last year to be very underrated as the most underrated team in all of college football last year, but they were definitely just underrated. They were definitely very, very underrated, and this team, of course, just came out of nowhere, and they were just really developing in the right direction right away. Kirk Zanetti just really showed us of how much of a winner he can be at this level in the Big Ten and definitely in all of college football. So Indiana coming off a pretty good year last year. Can they live up to what they did last year in 2025? Well, before we get into the prediction for this Indiana team, first just some thoughts on this Hoosier team. It's an Indiana team that I think a lot of people are expecting to take a step back from where they were last year. I disagree with that. I think this Indiana team is going to be once again pretty good. It's not one of the most talented rosters in the country, but they definitely got a lot of new faces that are playmakers. And, yes, they do lose Curtis Work at quarterback, but they got Mendoza, the transfer, coming in from Cal at quarterback. I think he does fit well into this system with this Indiana offense. And it's an Indiana offense that should be able to be pretty explosive like they were last year. And then defensively, they're not going to be the most talented defense in the country, but the defensive line was pretty big for them last year. They could probably be once again pretty good on that side of the football. And this defense overall should be pretty solid. So, yeah, Indiana should be once again a dark horse team in the Big Ten. So let's now get into the schedule for 2025. Here is that schedule for Indiana. And again, they were 11-2 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Indiana football team for 2025. And really, Indiana's first 3 games of the season are pretty easy. They don't really have a tough non-conference schedule. They got Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. So Old Dominion, they're a group of 5 teams. Same thing with Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State, though, is a former FCS team, and then Indiana State's an FCS team, and that's not a rivalry, of course, but they're just playing them this year because of that. So, yeah, Indiana, I think they will take care of business in all 3 of these games from August 30th to September 13th. They should be able to start out 3-0 fairly easily. It would definitely be a big shock if Indiana did, lose indeed one of these 3 games, but that's just not going to happen. Indiana is a well-coached team, and they definitely should know better going into these 3 games. So I got Indiana starting off 3-0 going into conference play the rest of the way from September 20th all the way to November 29th. And they open up Big Ten play against an experienced Illinois team on September 20th. This will be a home game here for the Hoosiers. And yeah, there's a lot of difference here between these 2 teams, but there are some similarities here between these 2 teams. This is going to be a big-time matchup. You look at Illinois; they're a very experienced team coming up this year in 2025. A lot of experience coming back for them, especially on both sides of the football. And they do have their returning quarterback coming back as well. So yeah, this Illinois team, they could be a top 15 team, a dark horse team potentially in the Big Ten, but so is Indiana. Now, Indiana is going to have a lot of new faces, and this is going to be their first Big Ten test here, but it's at home for Indiana, so I do like their chances in this one. I think this game is going to go back and forth. It could be a shootout, or it could be a low-scoring defensive battle. Illinois is probably going to have a good defense that can probably slow this Indiana football team down on the offensive side of the football. But I tell you what, I kind of been back and forth on this game, and I know I did say that I would not choose the home team every time, but I think this is a 50-50 game. It's really a game that really comes down to the wire, and I think just home field advantage is going to play the difference here. So with that being said, I think Indiana beats Illinois here. Again, it's a close game. I think it's probably going to be come down to the wire. It's probably going to come down to like a late turnover, and probably who can force the most turnovers in this game. So I got Indiana beating Illinois here. I think they probably win it by like 3 or 4 points, somewhere in that particular win range there for Indiana. So I got Indiana improving to 4-0. Then they go on the road to play Iowa on September 27th. First road game of the season here for Indiana. I think it's going to be a pretty tough game. Iowa's a team that's going to have a defense that probably can slow down this Indiana football team from being pretty explosive. It's probably one of those low-scoring defensive battles, but I've been kind of mentioning Iowa here throughout these predictions. I have like some concerns about Iowa's, depth and everything. I do like their starting lineup, don't get me wrong, but I think the depth is definitely a concern here if you look at the Hawkeyes. There's just not a ton of backup players in that secondary, and then basically on the defense, and then they don't really just have a proven offense at all. I mean, the one thing that Iowa needs to probably do on the offensive side of the football is run the football in this game and probably waste the clock down to create a low-scoring defensive battle. But I do trust, Kirk Cinetti as the head coach. I think he'll get this done, and I think it's probably going to be a tough game, but I think Indiana probably pulls away maybe late in the fourth quarter, and they at least win this game by like 10 points or maybe less than that. Again, it's just going to be a tough game. It's against a really good Iowa defense, but again, the depth does worry me if I'm a Hawkeye fan of Iowa, but I think Indiana, they're definitely capable of winning this game on the road. So I got Indiana winning that game and then improving to 5-0. Then they go into the month of October. They play on the road at Oregon on October the 11th. They get a bye week before playing this game. I actually just realized that. Yeah, this is going to be a pretty tough place to play for Indiana. And also, they didn't play Oregon at all last year in the regular season. And they also didn't play Penn State. So they will play with a couple of teams out of the Big Ten Championship from last year this year. And they do play them in separate months. But you look at this Oregon team, maybe they're not quite as talented as they were from last year. I mean, they're going to have a lot of young pieces that are going to have to step up and everything, but this will still be a pretty talented team. And I think this has a chance to be a really competitive ball game. But I think Oregon definitely playing at home. It's kind of hard to go against the Ducks when they're playing at their home place. So with that being said, I think Oregon does give Indiana their first loss of the season. But I wouldn't be surprised if this game probably goes into the fourth quarter. But I think probably by that time, Indiana probably does run out of stamina, and I think Oregon probably takes advantage of that. So I think the Ducks do win this game, and also kind of home field advantage does favor Oregon a lot in this one. So I got the Ducks giving Indiana their first loss of the season, so that does put them at 5-1. Then they come back at home against Michigan State on October the 18th. This will be a home game after kind of a tough test at Oregon after getting a little bit beat up. This is a Michigan State team that could be improved a little bit this year. They could probably be a bowl eligible type team. Maybe this is kind of one of those sneaky games where Indiana comes out a little bit slow. Maybe Michigan State's right there with Indiana in the first half. I know this game was not even close last year, but Michigan State had a first-year head coach, and they could be a lot better this year. So with that being said, maybe it's a close game in the first half, and then Indiana probably, pulls away in the second half. They probably win this one like 14, maybe it's 17 points, but I think they'll win it by at least a couple of touchdowns. Again, not a blowout, but I think Indiana does bounce back after a loss to Oregon, and they improved to 6-1 with a win over Michigan State. UCLA next week at home, also on October the 25th. Kind of like similar to Michigan State, UCLA could be a little bit better this year under second-year head coach Deshaun Foster. This is another game kind of similar to the Michigan State game. It could be a close game in the first half, but maybe Indiana probably will pull away in the second half. Maybe that's what happens. I think Indiana probably does get off to another slow start, but then second half they start to pick it up on the offensive side of the football. And I think UCLA will definitely run out of stamina as well. So I think Indiana does pull away, and they win this one by at least a couple of touchdowns as well, similar to the Michigan State game. But I got Indiana getting that win, and I think they improved to 7-1. Then they go on the road to play Maryland on November 1st to open up things here in the month of November. Maryland is a team that has a ton of question marks. This is a Maryland team that's coming off a pretty disappointing year last year. I think they definitely have a chance to bounce back this year. This could be a solid team that, Indiana will play, but I just don't know. Maryland's just got a ton of question marks. I just don't know how good the Terrapins are going to be, and I don't really study Maryland that much when it comes to lesser teams that are consistent in the Big Ten, but this is a Maryland team that probably will be solid by this time here in the month of November. And also, this is kind of a trap game for Indiana. But still, I think Indiana's coaching ability under Kirk Cinetti and this coaching staff for Indiana is just going to be enough. And I think Indiana probably, it's probably a close game in the first half, just like Michigan State and UCLA. But then they probably pull away maybe sometime in the fourth quarter. And I think it probably does go into the fourth quarter. But Indiana probably does win this one, I'm going to say, not by a couple of touchdowns. Probably just just by 10 points, so let's just put it that way. But I think Indiana does beat Maryland, and I got them improving to 8-1. And then they go on the road to play Penn State on November 8th. Very tough place to play here. Penn State's also going to be a pretty experienced team, especially on the offensive side of the football. They got probably the best 1-2 punch at running back. I mean, we already saw that. I already chose, Penn State to win this game, obviously. But yeah, Penn State definitely a team that's going to be pretty good this year. They absolutely could be a top 5 team and definitely a Big Ten championship contender. Yeah, Oregon and Penn State, these are probably the 2 toughest games on the schedule for Indiana, and they're both playing them on the road, so it's obviously going to be tricky to probably win one of these 2 games. But I got Penn State beating Indiana here. I think it's probably a close game, but Indiana probably does run out of stamina in the fourth quarter, and I think Penn State does win this one and they pull away. And I'm going to say they probably win by 10 points, so that puts Indiana now at 8-2. That's their second loss of the season to the Nittany Lions there on November 8th. And then they've come back at home to play Wisconsin on November 15th. Wisconsin is also a team pretty similar to Maryland that does have a lot of question marks. I just don't know how good Wisconsin is going to be. They're coming off a disappointing year last year. Maybe they bounce back after a disappointing season. And they've had a really disappointing, start to the Luke Fickell era. But I think Indiana playing at home, maybe they start off slow after coming off a physical game against Penn State the last week. Maybe they start off slow in the first half, but second half they probably pull away. And that could be the case here for Indiana going into next season, is probably they pull away in their games in the second half for most of them, maybe against Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, and also Wisconsin. They probably get off to slow starts in those games in the first half, and then second half they can probably pull away. But yeah, I think Indiana does beat Wisconsin. I think they win this one by a couple of touchdowns as well. And then they close things out. They actually get a bye week before playing their last game of the regular season on the road at Purdue on November 29th. Purdue is just not going to be a really good team this year. A lot of new faces on this roster, and I know Barry Odom has taken over, but I just don't know I don't know if it's going to be a good first year or not. And I think Indiana definitely is clearly the better team. And this game wasn't really that close last year, and I kind of expected another, probably a blowout in this one. That might be the biggest win here on the schedule in Big Ten play for Indiana this season against the Boilermakers. So I think Indiana does close out the regular season with a win over Purdue here on November 29th. And again, I just don't see this game being all that close. I know it's a rivalry, but Indiana definitely is the better team. So I got Indiana finishing 10-2 in 2025. This Indiana team, it's definitely a big step up from where they were last year. If you go back to my prediction last year on this Indiana team, I had them just going 7-5. So this is definitely a higher prediction compared to last season, but it's definitely under 11-1 from where they were last year. Again, Oregon and Penn State, 2 very tough games, both on the road. If they can at least win one of those road games, and that puts them probably at 11-1, and then probably a spot in the college football playoff. But again, it's really about the resume about them for as well. Again, Oregon and Penn State are going to be very tough road games, but I wouldn't probably be shocked if they did slip up against Illinois there on September 20th. That would probably put them at 9-3. But if they can probably beat Illinois and then some of those teams on the road, either against Oregon or Penn State, that still does put them at 11-1. But what if they lose to Illinois and then probably just win one of those road games? I mean, that could probably be the case here for this Indiana football team for 2025. So 11-1, 10-2, maybe 9-3, the likely records here for the Hoosiers for 2025. But I got them finishing 10-2 in 2025. So that's my prediction for Indiana for the upcoming 2025 season. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and also give me your prediction for this Indiana team as well. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.